Former Attorney General Pam Bondi set to give closed-door testimony this morning over her handling of the federal government's investigation into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his former girlfriend and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. As head of the DOJ, Bondi faced heavy criticism over the release of millions of documents pertaining to Epstein, some that actually revealed personal information and images of abuse survivors that should have been redacted. The committee voted back in March to subpoena Bondi, with lawmakers telling the AG she possessed valuable insight into the agency's release of the files. Who better than her? When she declined to appear for an April 14th deposition, though, Democrats on the committee filed contempt charges, arguing she was obligated to testify despite President Trump ousting her from her role earlier that month. Lawmakers say they'll ask Bondi about what decisions prosecutors made about investigating Epstein's associates, how the DOJ handled the congressional mandate to release those files, and whether the president himself was involved in that process at all. I want to bring in Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. He'll be with Bondi later today. There's a lot of directions that this could go, and I wonder for you what the top question or questions you have for the former Attorney General are.
Well, I want to understand why they didn't follow the law. They didn't release the files on time. They didn't release all the files. Still haven't. They illegally redacted files, including files embarrassing to Donald Trump. Why did they do that? What conversations took place between Pam Bondi and President Trump or folks at the White House about those decisions? And why was Ghislaine Maxwell transferred to a low-security, cushy prison camp after her conversation with Todd Blanche? So those are just a few of the questions that I want answers to. We're going to try to get those answers today. And
I think we should also point out that this is someone who, in bipartisan fashion, people on the Oversight Committee wanted to speak to. So this is not going to be, though it will be friendly from some Republicans, not necessarily across the board. And I think that that will potentially breed some interesting moments. We expect that we're going to see a transcript of this at some point, so we'll have some insight, but it's not on video. That makes it different, for example, than the way the Clintons were interviewed. And you can argue about who has more insight here, but the head of the DOJ was the person who was in charge of DOJ releasing these documents in the first place. So for folks who are wondering, hey, why am I not seeing this on camera? Can you just remind us how we got to this place?
Well, it's all part of the cover-up, unfortunately, and we see Republicans in Congress, including our chairman, James Comer, facilitating that cover-up. The American people deserve to see Pam Bondi on video, just like they saw Bill and Hillary Clinton on video. And as we discussed before, Hillary Clinton didn't have anything to do with the Epstein files or the crimes that were committed. The subpoena was for a deposition, which meant it would have been on video, under oath. Chairman Comer made the decision in negotiations with Pam Bondi to downgrade that to a closed-door, behind-the-scenes, transcribed interview, so the American people will never see it. They'll be able to read it at some point in the future, but they'll never see it. And unfortunately, that adds to the feeling out there across the country that there's been a cover-up here.
And at the same time, Bondi, when put in front of cameras, has been, we'll say, fiery, to put it in one way. She's also obfuscated on many of the key questions around the release of the Epstein files, though. And so I wonder whether it's on camera, off camera, transcribed, what have you, can you trust what she's saying?
Well, if she lies to us today, she'll be violating the law. I think the challenge might be getting answers out of her. She might refuse to answer questions. She'll try to evade questions. As you noted, she gets combative and aggressive when asked difficult questions that she doesn't have good answers for, but we're going to press and pin her down. I don't think she's going to get away with telling us whatever the Dow is at today, as she did in previous public hearings.
Yeah, that was quite the moment. I also think it's striking that you've got one of the top DOJ officials in Harmeet Dillon coming as part of Bondi's counsel. I wonder your reaction to that news and how it's not a conflict of interest or how DOJ is saying it's not.
Well, Pam Bondi is a private citizen today. So the fact that DOJ officials, including Harmeet Dillon, will be there, what I read into that is they're there to make sure she stays in line. They want to make sure that she doesn't say anything that could embarrass President Trump. That's what this is all about. I think Harmeet Dillon is also auditioning for the job of Attorney General. There's a competition going on between her and Todd Blanche. I think you'll see her come out before the cameras today and try to make a spectacle of herself to get Donald Trump's attention and hopefully secure that role for herself as Attorney General.
Where does it go next, though? I mean, the fact that you have Bondi in front of you was such a focal point for Democrats like you on the committee. Now that you're getting her, what's the next step?
Well, we're going to continue our interviews. We had a, I think, interesting interview with Tova Noel, prison guard, a couple weeks ago.
Definitely.
Each interview we have is revealing small bits of information that lead to more questions. My hope, ultimately, is that our investigation, the Oversight Committee's investigation, when we get all the documents, and we will ultimately get all the documents, even if the administration tries to prevent that from happening, we will, leads to a future Department of Justice, most likely, reopening the investigation when they realize that there's a lot of questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, and finding more accountability for the survivors at the center of this, several of whom are going to be speaking, is my understanding, before Bondi comes to testify. So we'll see some of that this morning. We'll keep the focus on this. I'm very interested to see what you guys come out with. Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia, thank you for coming on for this very important preview.
Washington is holding its breath today because in just a few hours, former Attorney General Pam Bondi will speak behind closed doors, and millions are waiting to see what happens next. The growing crisis surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein files has now entered a completely new phase. Members of Congress are demanding answers about why the Department of Justice never released all of the documents. And now all eyes are turning directly toward one of the key figures at the center of the controversy, Pam Bondi. And the biggest question is this: will she finally tell the truth today? Because Bondi's name has become linked not only to the release of the files, but also to accusations that certain records were intentionally censored. Some members of Congress claim that documents capable of politically damaging Donald Trump were deliberately hidden from the public. As the accusations intensified, Bondi remained silent for months. Now, for the first time, she will speak under oath. This closed-door testimony has already created political shockwaves across Washington. Democratic lawmakers are preparing to confront Bondi with aggressive questions, while Republicans argue the investigation is becoming a political attack. But behind the scenes, everyone is asking the same thing: who is Pam Bondi protecting today? Because, according to committee members, there are still far too many unanswered questions. Why were all of the Epstein files never released? Why were certain documents censored? Did the White House play a role in these decisions? And perhaps the most explosive question of all, what conversations took place between Pam Bondi and Donald Trump regarding these files? That is exactly what is driving tensions higher in Washington. And the controversy does not stop there. The transfer of Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell to a lower security prison facility is also expected to come under scrutiny today. Committee members want to know whether political pressure influenced that decision. But another major controversy is growing as well. Why isn't this testimony being shown on camera? Because millions of Americans want to see Pam Bondi answer these questions live. Instead, congressional leadership decided the session would take place behind closed doors, meaning the public will only see written transcripts afterward. And that decision has only fueled accusations of a cover-up. Some lawmakers are openly saying this. The American people are being prevented from seeing the truth. Part 2. What Pam Bondi says today could impact far more than just the Epstein investigation. It could directly affect the balance of power in Washington itself. Because in previous public appearances, Bondi often responded aggressively to criticism while avoiding direct answers to the toughest questions. But today is different. Everything she says will become part of the official record. And if she provides false statements under oath, the consequences could be severe. Some members of Congress believe Bondi will now be forced to explain major decisions made during her time leading the Department of Justice. According to growing allegations, certain Epstein-related records were hidden because they could create political damage. That is why today's testimony is not being viewed as an ordinary hearing. Many in Washington believe this could become a turning point, because lawmakers are not only focused on the past, they are also preparing to push for files that allegedly still remain hidden from the public. And behind the scenes, an even bigger fear is being discussed. What if the unreleased files contain names far bigger than anyone expects? That is the answer millions of people are waiting for. If Pam Bondi refuses to answer questions today, the controversy will only grow larger. But if she talks, the political fallout in Washington could be enormous, especially because any revelation connected to Donald Trump could instantly dominate headlines across the country. Lawmakers are already signaling that this investigation is far from over, promising that they will eventually obtain every remaining document. And that means the pressure surrounding the Epstein case is only getting stronger. Right now, millions of Americans are waiting for one thing. What does Pam Bondi really know? And maybe even more importantly, will she finally reveal it today? Because the testimony set to begin in just a few hours could shape not only the future of the Epstein investigation, but the future of American politics itself.